In this episode, I reflect on my 75 hard journey over a month after I finished. Welcome to Monologues by Hassie. My last update on 75 Hard was 50 days into it. Now it's been over a month since I finished, and I want to reflect on what the whole experience was like. For those of you who haven't listened to the first episode, I'll very quickly go through what Hard 75 or 75 Hard is. It's a program where you work out twice a day. The workout needs to be 45 minutes long, and one workout needs to be outdoors. You need to choose a diet, that's up to you, and I also added, and you can't drink alcohol for the duration of the program, for the full 75 days. I also added daily meditation, language learning, so I was practicing Sinhalese, and there were a few other things. I also cut out caffeine on top of everything. So if you break any of your habits, so the things you're meant to do or not do, you basically restart. So during my program, my experience, I actually restarted on day 6. I was expecting to get a kind of a sugar-free, non-alcoholic drink, and I was given a lemonade that definitely had sugar in it. So that reset me back to day 0, and I ended up doing 81 days of 75 hard in total, including my reset. So now that I've come out of it, how do I feel? I feel incredible. People tell me I look different to how I look, even though I probably say since I finished, I've probably put on a kilo or 2 back purely because I'm enjoying some really great foods. I'm having sugar again for the first time, which is incredible. First time since I kind of started the program. I'm having froyo, chocolate, all of these things I avoided for 81 days. So it is really nice to kind of be back into a lifestyle where I'm not forced, it's not so rigid, I'm not just doing things for the sake of doing it, but I think that's what I want to talk about. So day 50 was quite challenging, and the last 25 days really tested me. So whatever I said at day 50, those last 25 days were incredibly tough. I had a few things happen. The first was I got sick. So I got the flu or something that was going around. And I realized that even on days where I was feeling miserable, I was still able to go outside and go for a walk. And on top of 75 hard, I actually have quotas. So I have a system where for the last over a year and a half, I've been running 20 kilometers a week, I've been swimming 2 kilometers and doing 3 calisthenic workouts on top of daily push-ups. And even when I was sick, I still had to reach the 75 hard requirements of 2 workouts a day, but I also had to work towards my weekly quota, which is just something I've been doing for a while. So I realized that even though I felt like shit, because normally what would happen outside of 75 hard, let's say I was sick, I would give my body 3 to 4, even 5 days to recover, and I would do all of that exercise in a weekend, right? I might do it in the last 2 days of the week, but I didn't have that luxury. 75 hard program meant even when I was feeling miserable, I needed to do 2 45-minute workouts a day. And when I was at the worst of my sickness, that meant I was walking twice a day, right? So I was outside for 90 minutes just walking. And it taught me something. It made me realize that no matter how horrible I feel, I can go for a walk. And so that was an incredible thing to take out of it, because even now when I'm feeling horrible and you just want to lay in bed, maybe I don't need to do a 45-minute walk, but I know I can go do 10 minutes. And there's something about going outside and getting that fresh air. And yes, maybe you're feeling groggy and I'm not feeling social. And if somebody says hi to me on the street, I'll probably be like, in my head, please don't say hello to me. I feel like absolute dog shit on the inside. But it just taught me that, one, being sick does not mean I need to lie down and rest. Now, there'll always be an exception to this. But for the typical sicknesses that we all experience, at least once a year, like a flu, taught me that, hey, I can actually go outside and do things. And so that was important. I think I grew more resilient. Same thing for sleep deprivation. I am not the world's best sleeper. And even during 75 hard, cutting out caffeine, well, one thing was overall my sleep definitely improved, but I still had insomnia from time to time. And even on those days where I was sleep deprived, I went out and then went for a walk. Whereas previously, I might have slammed a coffee and tried to do some work and just felt horrible. So I still felt horrible when I was sleep deprived, but hey, I got out for a walk and that was incredible. And the other thing I had to do, because I cut out caffeine, I could not use it as a crutch. Because I couldn't use caffeine as a crutch, it was quite amazing. Now, considering I'm back to having caffeine now, albeit not all the time, I'm trying to have days where I don't do caffeine. But once I got through the caffeine withdrawal, even on days with sleep deprivation, where I did not drink coffee and I went out and did my morning walk and did my afternoon walk and went to work, it taught me that caffeine was something that I really don't need even when I'm feeling horrible. Because I was still able to get through my day. And if there was any massive benefit, it was the fact that, great, I had poor sleep, but I haven't compromised the next night of sleep by having caffeine. So it really kind of showed me what I have in myself. And so that was amazing. Now, I think the biggest takeaway, I was actually asked, one of my cousins asked me, what was your biggest takeaway from 75 Hard? And for me, it was quite simple. It was learning to do something for myself before I did anything for anyone else. And what do I mean by this? It's the fact that I'd wake up in the morning and be like, you know what? It's raining. I'm about to start work, but I'm going to take my umbrella and go for a walk. And I at that moment, you're not that keen, you're not that excited, especially after the initial high of starting a program like 75 Hard wears off. Once you go into your routine, you're dealing with the regular stresses of life, right? For example, sickness, work, whatever. And so even on the days that were very tough, and there were days where I had insane work deadlines and I just had to push the pedal a bit harder than I typically like to do at work. But even on those days, I would do something in the morning for myself. It might have been a run, it might have been a swim, it might have been a walk, it might have been some push-ups, right? Some basic calisthenics. And I learned that by doing that small thing for myself, I was fundamentally, I felt so much better throughout the day. Not because I inherently exercised, but because I did something for me before I did it for the company, before I did it for somebody else. And so if you put yourselves into whoever else you have obligations to in this world, it could be your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your boss, your children, right? Your neighbor, your friends, doesn't matter who. It is wonderful if you go and serve all these people. But 75 Hard taught me, do something, even if it's something small for yourself. Do it at the start of the day. Because it just means you can go through that day and you know that you looked after you. At the end of the day, you can't pour from an empty cup. So even though 75 Hard was incredibly draining, I think the concept of doing something for myself in the morning, be it language learning. And for me, language learning, when I was learning Sinhalese, my kind of favorite thing to do was listen to SBS Sinhala, which is a local broadcaster in Australia who just happens to have, they have radio in many languages, but they have this podcast in the language I'm learning, which is my native language, but I'm not particularly good at it, right? English is truly has become my first language, but once upon a time that wouldn't have been the case. And so I'm relearning the language my ancestors spoke. And I'd listen to SBS Sinhalese in the morning, and that was nice because I learned something for myself. I didn't learn this so I could make money. I didn't learn this so my work would be more efficient. It was something purely for me. And coming out of that now, I'm doing that more. I'm no longer stuck to the rigid 75 Hard program. But even this morning, I went for a run. And that's something that I really didn't do. I'm not a big fan of the kind of morning exercise. But before work, I went for a run, and that was incredible. And the same thing, I've woken up in the morning and said, you know what? Before work starts, we're going to go to the cafe, grab a coffee, and I'm going to read a few pages of this book. And that was incredible as well. And so that's the other thing I forgot to mention. On the topic of books, as part of 75 Hard is you need to read, I think it was 10 pages per day. And for me, that meant finishing like 2.5 books. Absolutely incredible. In the span of barely 2.5 months, I got through an extra 2 to 3 books. And that was really good because there was definitely if I look back at last year, 2025, I didn't read as much as I typically would have or did in 2024. Because when I was nomading around the world and exploring, I had the liberty to read and absorb information. And I really missed that in 2025 when I was doing other things and doing my experiments in sales and kind of coming back into a tech role. Reading kind of fell out the window. So 75 Hard was a wonderful way for me to bring reading back into the fold. And those are kind of the big things that I think I'm very grateful for doing. It was the fact that I grew more resilient. I learned how to work through sickness. I learned how to do something for myself, right? I learned how to develop myself first before developing anything for anybody else, right? I was filling my cup so then I could go and pour into other entities, be it work, be it to my friends, be it to my family. And so that was incredible. That's something I'm doing now. And then obviously there were improvements in my physique. I definitely saw that you have to take a progress photo every day. And I definitely saw as I got through that kind of first 70 to 80% of the program, I definitely am more toned than I was. But there's a caveat to this. There was a point in my 75 Hard journey, and right at the end, I remember there was a day I had a friend's birthday, and it was 4 days before I finished 75 Hard. 4 or 5 days. 4 or 5 days left. And people were asking me, how do you feel? Do you feel amazing? And I told them, I feel horrible. And I did feel horrible because I was burning the candles at both ends. With this incredibly rigid 75 Hard schedule, plus trying to have a social life, right? So I was going out to my friends' birthdays. It wasn't like I didn't go. I couldn't do it the same way I would have. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't staying out all night. I had to go work out. I had to go for a run after my friend's birthday party. And people were asking me, how do you feel? I said, I feel horrible. I feel worse than before. And I truly did. And this was the downside of my 75 Hard journey, is that towards the end, after I got to like day 50, 60, 70, because I was working hard at work, I got caught up with the flu, and because I had these work deadlines, I did not take time off as well when I had the flu. I did not rest. I was basically in this zombie state where my cortisol was so high for like the last month. People were telling me, we don't like this version of Hassie. Yes, I was absolutely grumpy. At the start of the journey, I was grumpy because I had caffeine withdrawal. At the end, it was because my cortisol was so high. I actually not only felt progressively worse towards the end of my 75 Hard journey, but the progress that I was seeing in my body definitely plateaued. It's like my body wanted to hold on to fat. I just felt sick. It was pretty horrible. And I remember I finished 75 Hard the day I finished a massive project at work. I remember it was a Thursday. We had a public holiday long weekend. I'd been putting in long days that entire week, the week before, the week prior. I'd been basically project managing this project and doing the implementation and dealing with the client. On top of that, doing 75 Hard. I'd been sick like 2 weeks prior. I was not really having any rest. My sleep was absolutely dog shit. And I was still working out for at least 90 minutes a day. I was running my 20 kilometers a week. I was doing all of this jazz. And I had no alcohol. I had no caffeine during those times. I just had to be a zombie and get through it. And when I look at the kind of pictures of my body and how I was feeling, I can see why I would not have improved beyond that. It was because I did not have enough rest. I was basically in this very high stress state where my body was saying, hold on to as much fat as you can. You are going through some sort of hellhole. We do not want you losing more fat. And so that's where the plateau kicked in. And with that, I'm glad the 75 Hard program ended. I'm grateful to be able to have a little bit more balance. I've been able to enjoy a little bit of sugar. Sometimes it's a little bit. I have binged, I'll be fair. We had a colleague make amazing cookies at work and I just could not stop myself, right? It's like those cravings came back like crazy. But I've made so much progress by doing the program. And so I think the negative of 75 Hard for me, like that sense of plateauing and progressively feeling worse because my body was just so under-rested, that taught me a lot. Because I think coming out of that, it's made me realize that despite all the progress I made, I think the one big thing that I know is gonna really move the needle for me is prioritizing rest and recovery. And that is an important lesson to take out of it. And I always knew that was the case. 75 hard meant I got to see the extreme repercussions of not being rested. How did I feel? How was my body performing? Now, to be clear, the other thing I noticed during my 75 hard journey is, yes, I have these quotas for running and exercise. My performance in all of these activities became worse. Now, it's not that I'm not the type of person who's always trying to run as fast as I can or try to swim as fast as I can. In fact, I don't do that at all. It's very rare. But I definitely felt like even just trying to do the volume, I was struggling. My body was so depleted. And so coming out of it, now that I've been a month and a half out, I've still had a day or two of stress here and there. But I'm also getting much more rest in. There are days where I don't work out or work out significantly less or just go for one walk. And I think that's important. It's just getting that sleep in, getting the rest, getting the recovery, giving your body, giving your mind a chance to heal and de-stress. That's important as well. It's not just physical, it's also mental. So that is definitely something I'm taking up. And so overall, am I glad I did 75 hard? Yes. Would I do it again? I think maybe, but I would change a few things. I'd pick a less strict diet for starters. I picked a no sugar diet, no added sugar diet, and that made things really tough. I would spend time in the supermarket just reading labels. It was hard to eat out. And I think that's an important part of your life, like being able to enjoy social meals with your friends and your family. Like that is such a big part of human existence, right? And when you cut yourself out of that, that's tough. But I'm also proud of myself. Amongst all of this, I still had a life. I went out with my friends. I went to the birthdays. I went to the parties. I even did a rave in the middle of 75 hard. I went to a 5-hour rave where I could not drink. I could not eat any of the food. I think I snuck a protein bar in, right? There was pretty much that was 5 hours where all I did was kind of do the doof doof dance walk around. And I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't on alcohol. It was just completely clean, right? So there was all these incredible things I was able to do. I still went on dates during 75 hard. Maybe that was suboptimal, but hey, we made that happen too. And so I'm very proud of myself for, I think, everything I was able to do. And if I look at how doing 75 hard contributed to the start of this year, I mean, we're in May right now, which is insane. But the fact that I did this and spent 80 days, including the time I had to reset, 81 days doing this 75 hard program, means that I honestly feel like I grew so much in the last 4 to 5 months. And that is something I'm grateful for. And this is almost like a way to kind of kickstart my physical development so I can then go and do things in other domains. And so that's all I really want to cover today. I think, the other thing I've done since I've been out of 75 hard, I've actually done 3 half marathons and just spent days doing nothing. And I'm just grateful for being out of the regime. So to those of you who are listening to this, I wish you great success on all your endeavors. You've just made it through another episode of Monologues by Hassie. It brings me great pleasure to know that you made it to the end. To listen to more episodes, subscribe on your favorite podcast app or visit monologuesbyhassie.com. Thanks for swinging by.